All right, man. Here we are. We're back again. It's every other Wednesday is white noise night. It's opportunity for me to speak with people that can school me on the psychology and the mind and the politics and the antics and the ways of being of white world. So I needed some Talus men and Talus women to help me understand what I always am just missing, because obviously I'm missing something. People come at me oftentimes and say, well, that was racist what you said, or that was terrible what you said, or oh my God, you're always talking about white people, whatever. So here we go, white noise night, which me I always look forward to because I'm not the star attraction. So tonight, as usual, we have my good friend, educator extraordinaire, doctor, one of my few PhD friends that I actually like and think is actually a good person. So, and that is Jay Wamstead, who is an educator in Atlanta. So Jay, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good evening.
Coming at us from Atlanta. And we also have, get this, a recent entrant, because the last time that we talked, Jay, I got a message kind of out of the blue, like, oh my God, I have so many thoughts about like this stuff that you guys talked about, and specifically the stuff around nice white parents, which I still don't feel, it's, for those people listening or watching, it's a podcast, it's a serial podcast about parents who are nice white parents. And, you know, it followed different schools, how parents interact, how they use their power to either get what they want or move on to other schools. And I don't think I still have nailed all my feelings about it. So we thought we would come back to it again. But we do have another issue that we want to talk about tonight, too, which is this presidential election is bringing up some feelings. There are lots of people in their feels. And I shot Jay a message because I just got harangued by one of my white friends. So it's a good topic for white noise, who, when I said, man, just, you know, this Biden's positions on charter schools and choice are disqualifying for me. It's like getting to be like too much for me. And I couldn't finish any sentences after that. Like anything that came out of my mouth after that, I was getting the biggest lecture of my life. I felt like I was the least intelligent person on planet Earth. And so I wanted to talk about it tonight a little bit. So how's that for a setup, guys?
That's quite a setup.
All right. That's a big setup, isn't it? A lot. I know. All right.
How much time do we have?
Well, let's start with just back to basics again. Here we come again with the nice white parents. I don't know, Jay, did you have a chance to go through and listen to any more of it, or are you done with it?
No, I finished it, and I really loved hearing you guys on Eight Black Hands talk about it the other day, because you did. Yeah, you liked it about as much as I thought you would, which is not much. But I'm super interested in what Kim has to say. So I'd love to just kind of pass that to her and see what she brings.
All right,
sure.
Kim, what's your takeaway?
Well, thank you. So it's funny because I've been following Chris. I've been following you for a long time on social media, and I read all of your posts, and I listened to the podcast, and I've really sort of, you know, this particular topic is something that I have thought a lot about as someone who has worked professionally in public education, not as an educator, but I've worked for a large charter school network here in Los Angeles on the advancement side, and I'm a parent of public school children. So in a neighborhood that is very diverse and authentically so. It really is, at least here in Los Angeles, a mix of a lot of the cultures and races that we have here in the city. And so it's something that I've really thought about from a number of angles for a while. And so, of course, when this podcast was first starting to make its way out into the world, a lot of my friends were sharing it, were posting about it. You know, I can't wait to listen. This should be really interesting. It should be really hard. I think knowing that the nice white parent label was, there was a little bit of maybe tongue in cheek in that. I know that's how the parents sort of referred to themselves in the story, and how they're referred to. And so I think at least within my circles of mostly other liberal, progressive people, I think knew that this was going to be, they were the audience, and that this was going to be the finger pointing at them here's how the white people have messed up. So I think, with that in mind, I decided at first I wasn't terribly interested, because as soon as I started hearing I read or listened to the trailer, and they're like, oh, and integration and these things. And I said, well, you sort of lost me with that, because that's a topic that I've really done a lot of research on, and been part of conversations about that. And my friend of mine said, no, just give it a listen, make it through the whole thing, and then, and then make a judgment. So I did, I listened. And, I think I had some similar reactions that you guys all had. I thought some of the episodes were better than others. I think, to be fair, there was she did some interesting reporting on some of the research she did in terms of the historical information. I thought that was really valuable to see what, parents in the 60s, how they were thinking about this, how they were talking about it, and bringing it into the public sphere. Beyond that, I guess my question at the end of it was, what was the point? I know sort of the serial model is, it's sort of this slice of life. And we're going to sort of zoom in on this one particular story or example that the public may not know a lot about. So we're just going to kind of come in and show you what this is. And we're going to ask some questions, but we're not really going to give you the answers. Look, I think it's not invaluable. And I think especially now, while a lot of white folks, myself included, are really examining what is our relationship to racism, especially with all the events of the summer, and how are we stepping up and showing up in our communities to address this. I think if it brings value to folks to sort of continue to deeply examine their own positions and sort of place in all of this, then I think it will have done. Hopefully, it will do some good. Other than that, I felt like I wanted to walk away with some sort of either call to action, or what is the takeaway? Like, what are we walking away from this as white people better equipped to do or to say, besides just having to own up that this is, but it also wasn't a surprise. We all know about white flight. We all know that white folks have different access to resources when it comes to choosing schools or choosing neighborhoods to live in because of the schools that are there. So I think a lot of it also just wasn't a surprise to me. And so I think that was sort of where I just left feeling a little bit unsatisfied, aside from some of the content itself, which we can get into. But just sort of wondering, like, I wonder what people are taking away from this, because I don't think I was necessarily the audience, because I'm already pretty informed and pretty tapped in to this topic. And I think other people seemed to certainly be impressed by the quality and by sort of the overall, what it was trying to do. But again, my question is sort of what's next? Like, so what are you doing about it? How are you as a white person going to be a more either responsible member of your community? How are you standing up against racism? How are you supporting or advocating for people in your community who are having a different experience than you?
What's the point? I actually like that as a takeaway. I mean, Jay, what about this takeaway of, like, what was the point? It was entertaining for a minute. So then what?
So Kim said a great sentence, and I was going to bounce it to you, but you just bounced it to me. But so Kim said, you said, I'm not the audience. And so the question is, who is the audience, right?
Right.
Who is the audience? And it struck me as the podcast went on, and it kind of lost some steam. And it reminds me of some essays I've written at times where I had a really great idea, and then I just kind of lose the thread because the idea is not enough to carry it. And her great idea was an amazing, that's why the first 2 episodes were so good, is this school that had done this whole thing with the French embassy and all, also happened to be the same physical plant where all these parents tried to, made happen back in the 60s and then never sent their children to. And that coincidence made an amazing first 2 episodes. And then it kind of just, like, to me, flattened out into, anecdote and statistics. And so the question is, yes, who is the audience? And so I think I have an answer to that, but Chris, I would like to hear you answer that. Who do you think the audience for this is?
I mean, I feel like you're just kicking it to me, and I don't know, man. Like I said, you guys are supposed to be helping me understand white world. I mean, like, listen,
Chris,
I don't know who.
Did you wear that Boys in the Hood? Is that a hoodie? Just because there were 2 white people here, did you feel like you needed
Probably.
to yeah, okay, all right.
Probably had to make a statement with my clothes. Yeah. So like, listen, who was the audience? As I listened to it, I thought to myself that there is somebody who is gonna have their like conscience disturbed by what they're hearing, and maybe they're gonna call themselves out silently to themselves. They're not necessarily gonna broadcast it loudly, but they're gonna kind of go somewhere in the middle of this. They're gonna kind of go, "Oh shit, that's me," like, you know, and maybe that's who the audience is. But I mean, she said. Correct me if I'm wrong. It felt like she said "we" more than one time. Like as parents, as white parents, we know, and we. So that tells me there was a we. Like there was a group that she was shooting for, and she was including herself in that group. I mean, she said things like, "We know that we're the most powerful thing in public education," something like that. She said, and I felt like, oh, okay, that's an admission. As somebody who's on the outside looking in, oh, that's put it out there, just like you're walking around thinking that, huh? I guess to Kim's point, I don't know that I'm surprised by that. But if you put me on the spot and said, who's the audience? That's what I would say, is that she kept saying we a lot. And I felt like she was talking about her tribe, white parents who have to make tough decisions about schools, and especially ones that consider themselves not to be racist, not to be conservative, not to be Republicans.
Very left-leaning, right? I mean,
left-leaning,
it's a narrow slice of folks that she's.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting that you guys brought up on your podcast, Chris, I think it might have been Cole who mentioned, sort of, and this was sort of, I think what bothered me also in the beginning was just sort of the white centeredness of it, that this was an incredible amount of, not that it's not an interesting story, and Jay, as you mentioned, I did think it was sort of interesting going into the annals of what was happening at this school. I mean, just as a person who's interested in these things, but what if we were to put the same resources and energy into promoting other voices like yours, Chris, and other educators of color and people who are doing this work, doing it differently, and that's partly been the whole point of what these last several months for white people has been. It's like, listen to Black voices, consume art by Black artists, read books by Black authors, pay more attention outside of sort of what's already in your circle. So this to me felt a little bit safe, that this was, okay, we can talk about race, but this is the chance for us white people to maybe talk about it together with other white people. Without having to be too uncomfortable. That it's going to push some comfort. Like I think for certainly people who maybe haven't, who don't live in urban areas and don't have the same experience that, that I had as my children were entering school, where we live in a city that has massive amounts of choices. And even sometimes based on where you live, the school that's assigned to you might not actually be the closest school. There are, everyone sort of plays the game of which ones perform better and which one has more white kids. And then, what about these other things? And then how about I'm just going to opt out altogether? So I come from a place where, there's I don't think a lot of people are as reflective. So I think necessarily. Maybe
it's them, who hear this message and they think, I don't know that, like, when I just said that somebody might listen to it and have their conscience disturbed by listening to it. I might have to take that back, because I'm not so sure that actually works. Like, I feel like because I'm not assuming that any of those people are unintelligent, undereducated. I don't think, I'm sure it's targeted at college educated, middle to affluent, definitely affluent by world standards people who make certain buying decisions and purchasing decisions that make it advantageous for the New York Times to put this podcast out there, right? So that tells me a little bit about who it's for. Like, if I had to get if I had to back up and say, no, that's who it's for, because how they advertise, who they're advertising to or whatnot. I don't think any of those people are dumb or dense. So this wouldn't be the first time that they would be encountering. I think the joke's on me, listening to it as kind of like an outsider going, I'm getting some of the inside stuff on how white people think, or at least what they'll admit that they think in private.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought that was another interesting, there was what people were saying privately in this context, of the story that she was telling, about whether it was, we want to help set up this school and get things going in this direction. And are we going to actually send them there or not? And how people think about it in the broad sense. And it made me think about how so many of the conversations that I have with other white people, other friends of mine, other parents, other, again, liberal, people mostly doing good work in the world, come to me privately to have the conversations. And they don't want to do it publicly because of the potential for backlash of how it might appear to conflict with what people perceive their values to be, particularly when it comes to things like charter schools or teachers unions. And so the voices who, everyone's, they're happy to disagree and get sort of messy in public. But then somehow coming behind the scenes to say, actually, I agreed with what you said, or, that post I saw you write was, really, really struck with me, but, they just don't want to put it out there. So I think it happens both ways. I think people are saying terrible stuff behind the scenes. And I think there are people who are very, who are just afraid to agree or to say it out loud.
The number of white people, Jay, this came up in 2 of our shows now, I think. The number of white people who have slid in my DMs over years to say, I really agree with you. I'll never say it in public. That one thing that you said is not something I can ever say. I can never, and if you ever mention it, I'll deny it. But basically, there's a fear of saying certain things, like, even when you agree.
So I want to hold up, and thinking about the audience still, I want to hold up something Cole said. I don't want to misrepresent him, but I'm gonna try to remember that he just didn't even feel like he wanted to be talking about this the other day. And what he said several times throughout the podcast was, I don't care what you do with your kids, nice white people, good for you, go do what's best for your kids, like that. And then the next step is everybody should be doing what's best for their kids. That's, and I don't want to misrepresent him, but I feel like that's kind of what I took away from him. And if I can hold that up in one hand, and I can hold up this image that I cannot remember how to say her name, but the producer reporter in Nice White Parents uses this wonderful image that I've read and quoted in other places of white people as somebody in an antique store wearing a giant backpack, and everywhere we turn, we just kind of knock stuff over as we're looking around at our world. And I hear Cole, yes, do what's best for your kids. If we all did that, maybe we'd be better off. But also, I hear Jaffe White. Is that her name? I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
I hear this elephant image of, yeah, but Rob, well-meaning white savior Rob, walked into this place to bring them the French program, and he just kept knocking shit over with his backpack as he was moving around. And I think if there's a good audience here, it's the Robs that are out there doing stuff and don't know they're doing it. Now, I'm not sure this podcast is going to get them there, right? I'm not sure, and that's a whole other conversation. But so I want to bounce that back to y'all. Hold up, Cole on one side being I don't care, give a rip about this podcast. Everybody should be doing what's good for their kids. Go. And then the reporter holding up this image of the backpack, and is there a middle way, or should we be tacking one way or the other, towards Cole or towards the reporter?
Well, first of all, I don't think that Rob is unaware of what he was doing.
Okay.
I felt like Rob was a smooth operator, came into a school, knew how to raise money, knew how to take things over, was very professional, knew how professional things work, how they go, probably had a little corporate in him, probably understood how to move and shake through things like this, made the most of it that he could, got what he wanted to, and always knew what all people in his position know is, if it doesn't work out, I can move on. I have another choice. I have another option. Some of the people that he was coming in to displace and move around don't have that as a frame of mind. I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to make a move. And if I don't like it, then, I'll move on to the next thing. So
let me interrupt and just
go ahead.
Just interrupt and ask about, and we can't answer this for sure about Rob. We don't know Rob, but the phrase they used, somebody described Rob as well-meaning, right? And that is such a like great word to me to describe a lot of white saviors throughout history. And if we take that at face value, if Rob was well-meaning and he didn't really know what he was doing, that's one way to think about it. But is your sense that for the most part that's not true? That these well-meaning people, like, they know more than we're giving them credit for out here watching them.
Okay, so this is the part in the conversation where I say a bad thing and then I get in trouble with it. But it's, so if you get out of the surface level of thinking about these and you get very academic about white supremacy, and if you believe that such a thing as white supremacy exists, and you go through the academic literature about white supremacy, when I say that white supremacy is a self-cleaning oven, meaning that it often just cleans itself without even acting, you don't have to really talk about intent anymore. It's like on autopilot. You don't have to talk about what somebody intended to do or whether they were well-meaning or not, because then you get lost in pretending like you're naive about white supremacy. White supremacy always comes out on top. And even when it just seems like weird, it's just weird how we all ended up in this one place, or it's just weird on how the money all ended up over here. Oh, that's just weird. And it's only the oppressed who actually, what's really fatal and dangerous for the oppressed to be that naive, that like,
sure,
I'm just well-meaning. I'm just like, I'm unconscious about the fact that what I'm doing is going to put me on top in the end, that I'm going to have an advantage when I'm done doing the thing that I'm doing right now. I don't care if you have the flat front khaki pants. I don't care what type of beer you drink. I don't care how nice you are in your affect or whatnot. There's something criminally insane and on autopilot about white supremacy that allows people to continuously end up on top, even as they're trying to just, present as being the most open and giving. But it would be weird because in the law of big numbers, and you're a math guy,
that's true,
there would be more losses if it was just well-meaning kind of random, right? There would be some wins, some losses, some, a little mix, but somehow the group always ends up with the most shit, right? The most privilege hoarding, islands of privilege, suburbs. There's whole books written on opportunity hoarding, right? Those aren't bad people. Those aren't people who are waking up every morning thinking, I'm bad. I'm a bad person.
I want to ask Kim a question, but you reminded me that my son is going through this phase because we're stuck inside all the time. He's playing Monopoly against himself. And he brings the stuffed animal out and just sits it there and plays against the stuffed animal. And he's genuinely surprised at the end that he wins every time. Like, he truly is like, yeah, it's just every time I win and Gray just gets all this bad luck. And he's a kid, like he's only 9. I really think he is like genuinely, like, he means it in the moment. That's what I was reminded of right there. It's like, there's a ignorant naivete there that to a 9-year-old playing Monopoly is cute, but to a group of people, it's way less cute. But Kim, I want to know because I would describe many of my friends as well-meaning white people. And I want to know if that's true for you, if that feels, or if Chris's self-cleaning oven kind of feels more.
It's not my self-cleaning oven, just to be real. Shit. If I owned it, I'd shut it down. So just to be real.
Yeah, I think to some extent, yes. There, look, I certainly think about the people that I'm, in my community that are definitely well-meaning. I think there are some people who are not, and I've heard from those folks too. I remember, the conversations when our children were, first getting ready to, to go to kindergarten. It was like, well, I don't know. I wouldn't send my kid to that school. It's Title I, or, I don't want my kid to be in the minority as a white person. So some people will just flat out say what they're thinking, and I don't think they're necessarily well-meaning. Look, I think, education is one of those topics where we only sort of know as much as we know. And with respect to our own children and our own sort of bubble, kind of what's immediately in front of us. For some folks, who don't, as I mentioned before, being in a large urban area where even just, you say the word charter school as an example, and it means something different here than it does in other parts of the country. So I think to some extent, we are only sort of informed by what's closest to us and what's sort of in the closest proximity. And then I think beyond that, I think there are people who really do want to do what's right and want to be, responsible members of their community and good citizens and not resource hoard, and be, good, good members of the community who don't try to take over the meetings and who aren't trying to gain the power or exercise their power. And I've seen some parents do that very, very well, and in ways that I think are actually contributing to the community as a whole in a way that everyone really does benefit. One of the, I know you guys mentioned, I think in the last conversation, Courtney Miketon, who founded Integrated Schools, who tragically, I don't remember if you mentioned this, was killed earlier this year or end of last year. And she was someone that I had an opportunity to sit down with several years ago. And we kind of talked through a lot of these things and sort of expressed what was frustrating about it. But her big takeaway and her big, what she, I think, as her legacy with that organization, and which you guys mentioned a little bit last time, was decentering the whiteness in it. And, to talk about how do you be a responsible white person? How do you do it, quote unquote, the right way? How do you make sure that if you're in a minority as a white person, that you're not being the Rob who just sort of, barges in and says, here, I've got and respect the existing culture at the schools. And so I think there are people who really are well-meaning in that and are actually doing it well. I say that anecdotally, just from people in my life and in the communities that I'm a part of and the schools that I've been a part of as a parent. I don't know that that's the case everywhere. And I think the danger is then, what we talk about as applying to white people doesn't necessarily apply to others. That if we say as white people, we want to be, we're going to choose to integrate we're not going to opt out of our school that is primarily kids of color. We're going to show up and be present and support with our per pupil funding dollars and be supportive that way. That we shouldn't necessarily expect the same from everyone. That's still a choice and a privilege for white people to get to do. And if we say, I am against this for me, because I don't think this is necessarily, as a white person, helpful for this larger context, that we can't then turn around and say, and it's bad for you too, and it's bad for you, and you shouldn't do it either.
I just want to say, Jay, this has come up with you multiple times now. Like, you've heard me say this before, but like Dr. Cole saying he does not care about those parents. Let them do their thing. Sick of centering them and everything around them or whatnot. And always, I'm just kind of like, I have that little bit of gossip in me that I love to just like listen in on a conversation. So to me, that's what the podcast was. It was like listening in on white folks talking about what they do, how they make their moves. So in that way, it was interesting to me. But the problem that both Dr. Cole and I will have, and everybody in our position, is it won't be enough for them to control the theater that they're in. Once they get their kids into the safe harbor of the schools that they want to be in, then they adopt a politics that prevents other people from having what other people want, right? In terms of, you guys have mentioned now charter schools and school choice. And most of those programs, charter schools and school choice, most of those things, the constituency that they're aimed at most of the time, not always, but most of the time, are not the nice white parents. So really, they're using their social power to prevent someone else somewhere else from exercising a thing that they exercise for themselves. And that's when you for sure lose all reasonable doubt about well-meaning versus not well-meaning. Because I honestly believe we are too far in history now. We've gone too far for you to either be that devious or that ignorant. You have to be one or the other, because there's too much information in the world for you not to be one of those, right? There is no kind of like safe space in between devious and ignorant on that one to me. You have to know that you're stopping someone else who's less qualified or less resourced than you are, and less able to make the decisions that you make from having something that they want, which kind of brings us around to Biden in a way, in a circular kind of way.
No, in a very real way. And I want to ask the question. But I do want to say this Ta-Nehisi Coates quote that I read somewhere last week. It said something like, good intention is a hall pass through history. It's a sleeping pill to ensure the dream, or something like that. And that is not really kind to the well-meaning people. And that was a really resonant quote to me. That made sense of a lot of stuff. But so I want to ask a question, and this directly, I live in Atlanta, and we are very, very, very racially segregated city. I mean, most cities are, obviously, but we have a lot of Black people live in Atlanta, and that's it. That ensures the dream. Yeah.
Love that.
And I have a question about. I want to talk about charter schools and everything you just said, and get it back to Biden, because I think this matters. But my first question to you is, you used like several terms, and you kind of used them interchangeably. And you said charter schools, and you said school choice. And I want to know what you mean by school choice. I know what you mean by charter schools, because that's kind of a defined thing. But school choice means like lots of things to lots of people. And I kind of want to know what you mean by it. And then we can talk a little bit from there.
I mean, it's a good question, because I feel like there are people within the reform world who are very kind of partisan to, I'm a charter school person, but I don't do vouchers. Yeah. You have some people who say, I do vouchers, but I don't do universal vouchers. I'm only for low income vouchers and not universal vouchers. You have some people, like, I see that, let me see if she's on here right now.
And I think you just nailed the line Biden's trying to walk.
Kayla is on here, and I think she did work either now or she has done work in Arizona. Where in Arizona, it's kind of open to more people. Like, it's not just a poor thing to have choice, and charter schools aren't just for poor. Matter of fact, there's middle class people, and everybody's in charter schools, like different socioeconomic statuses or whatnot. That's closer to what I think. Here's what I think. I think you have a child, you have a baby, you look at that baby in the face, and you know that you're going to have to make some decisions on how you're going to care for that kid. There's something in the back of your mind, like it was for me with my first one, that's telling you, I might mess this up, right? This might not go well. Thank you.
Only your first one? I felt
my first one. Well, my first one for sure. By the second and third and whatever, you kind of like, I think, adopt a different attitude. But my first one, definitely the tape in my head was, I may not be qualified to do this. I actually am probably going to fail at this. This is going to be really hard. I can't believe that I'm in charge of a whole ass human. And I got to do something here about it. And I didn't know a lot of the things that people know and that I know now in terms of parenting. Then I just knew that there were some things that were consistently drilled into me as a kid, which was education was the great equalizer, or once you get an education, they can't take it away from you. So if you talk to my oldest son, probably was loose on a lot of things except for education. Like, that was the one thing. What I learned about that, being in the situation that we were in, being a paycheck to paycheck family, and being a family that got evicted a few times and had the heat turned off a few times, and that whole scenario, was that the number of choices and the options that you have in life are different than, like, he had friends that were more well-to-do, and he had friends that were poorer than we were. And what I would see when we would start making moves, like, for instance, when you leave elementary school and you have to go to middle school and people go different directions. Yeah. That's when you know what school choice is. We can talk about it like it's an abstract policy, or we can talk about it in terms of, I watched friends based on their color and their income go different directions to middle school. And it was because some parents had more choices than others did. They had more options, ranging from everything from Cretan-Durham Hall, which is a private school in St. Paul, where we lived, to the school that nobody wanted to go to, where kids were getting beat up, which was the one we were assigned to, right? That's school choice to me. School choice isn't about a charter. It's not about a law. It's not about a policy. It's about you and I being in the same spot one day, and then we have to make a move, and you end up somewhere better. Your kid's three grade levels ahead of where mine is because you have more resources. Thus school choice.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers your question the right way, but you know.
Well, no, there's no right way. So I do think it's worth thinking about.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's stop for a second. I got to know who this is playing the piano, because that is a Gen X song, and that is not a Gen X person playing that song, though, right?
No. Well, as the Gen X parent of a Gen Z, I don't know what she is, a 12-year-old. Sorry,
she's in
as
Z,
I put in the chat, I was like, I don't know if you can hear the piano. I'm sorry.
What is that? That's
because we have, you know,
it's the song. It's the song from White Chicks, Chris. That's what you know it from.
What's the song? 1,000 miles.
By who though?
By
not Natalie. Not
Natalie. No, I know.
It's not her. But you know it from White Chicks, Chris. I'm telling you, that's why all
Vanessa Carlton.
That's not who it is. Is it Vanessa Carlton?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Anyways,
okay, I'm going to try to
root your train of thought there. You know,
no, it's okay. You know, the good Wi-Fi spots are at a premium while we're all stuck inside. So
as a Gen Xer, I recognized it from probably some 90s movies or something.
Yep. You got it. Yeah, she's
Anyways,
so I'm sorry, I cut you off, Jay. Go ahead. Say
what you were okay. So this is so y'all say on A Black Hands, I've heard you say a lot, like the money should go with the child, right? And that seems seems to be that comment. That seems to be the stance, and I want to just quote. I wrote this down. Donald Trump said, a month back, he said, if schools do not open, the funding should go to the parents to send their child to public, private, charter, religious, or homeschool of their choice. And that's a very delineated stance of sending the money with the child. My question is that going to work? If in a universal voucher system, right, is literally tacking the money to the child going to work, or is it going to create a situation? And I want to say, I know what you're going to say. It's not working now. I know that. All right. So don't come at me with that.
Yeah. Okay.
They're already in the comments. I know saying it. I know it's not working now.
Yeah.
But this is what I picture when I think about universal charters. And I'll tell you a story about a charter here in Atlanta that scares me. Because first off, I'm very pro charter. I'm very pro school choice, towards the middle. I'm very reluctant about this FAR voucher system. And here's why, because I picture attaching the money to the child being the way we attached health insurance to the employer way back when, because it was an expedient thing to do, and the disaster that made of our healthcare system, because caring for sick people is expensive and insurance doesn't work for it. And in the same way, educating children is expensive, especially children that are coming in with less reading skills, are coming in with less math skills, whatever. All right. And the system of just send the money to the child and let them go off and it's going to work out, I'm not sure the free market's going to bear that. That's what I'm trying to say. The free market has not borne healthcare.
Well, first of all, let me just respond to part of that.
Okay. And then, go.
There's no realistic world where a voucher system is a free market system. Like anybody who studies and understands what an actual free market is, we're nowhere close to it. And there's nothing being proposed, even at the most libertarian end of my spectrum of friends. When they propose a state voucher system, it still comes out to me looking more like single payer healthcare. That's what it seems. Which is weird to me, because single payer healthcare is something that people on the left push, really appreciate.
But to me, from what I understand of extreme vouchers, let's call it. I mean, universal vouchers.
Universal vouchers, yeah.
Let's call
everybody
it.
Gets a voucher.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, the theory behind universal vouchers is that it will take a lot of children out of traditional public schools, and some of those schools need to contract and dissolve and close, and competition will spring up all around the world as if by magic, because the free market does it. And those children will find other places to go, better places to go, because competition, free market, will create those other places. Again, my parallel being healthcare, that has not happened with healthcare. We're still controlled by some big companies that are only out to make money, and it's not profitable to insure sick people. It's why we fight against it, not we. It's why the industry fights against it. So it is a free market thing. The hope is that the free market will come in and patch these holes, right?
I mean, so when I think about it, and especially if you want to talk about it from an academic perspective, like, the theory of it, if you think about Milton Friedman and all that, definitely you're going to get a free market bent and all that. Sure, fine, gotcha. But when people propose it in modern times now, it's usually aimed at a specific population to have access to things that they don't have now. It's never really this libertarian kind of big argument about markets. There are like 40-something states that have a version of a choice program in them. And if you go and look at the list of who they are for or whatnot, the majority are for very special populations to have access to things they don't have access to right now. So if we really want to talk about in brass tacks versus the abstract, the way that they are proposed and passed and are trying to be passed, they are usually targeted. And they're usually targeted at opening up opportunity for people that have less opportunity than others, right?
Yeah.
Deaf and hard of hearing, there's a ton of voucher programs across the country for those. Low-income kids trapped in certain districts, certain schools, dyslexia, very special needs kids, whatnot. That's kind of the bulk of the programs, right? But Arizona's an outlier. I see Kayla chiming in here. Arizona is one that I point to a lot of times where I think it's successful in that it doesn't become just a poor thing that you can just take away from the poor. Because you open it up more broadly or whatnot, it's more politically viable, right? Once you start doing something just for the poor or low income, is people on the left and the right who have power find fancy, clever arguments to stop you from doing it. It's only when it exiles that group of people. It doesn't stop, people with more resources from doing what they do already.
Well, that's why universal, and then I want to bounce this to Kim. That's why universal vouchers is like we were talking about earlier, you and I were tweeting, it's a wedge issue because it appeals to people on the left that want to use the money in a good government kind of way. And it appeals to people on the right who are sending their kids to private school, and it would just be a $10,000 a year knock off their tuition because that's how it would work. And it doesn't appeal to people in the center. It appeals to me because I care about the failure that is the public school system. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, but like if you're not rich and your kids are in a school and you're just fine, like you don't care about vouchers. Like it doesn't help you at all. And that's most people, but it's a wedge issue because it could really grab the right and the left. I think I did that wrong, but whatever. Okay, so I'm gonna stop for a second and I'm gonna tell a story, but I want Kim to have a chance to speak.
What say you, Kim?
Oh boy. I think I tend to, on this particular issue, get stuck very much in the intellectual sphere. The idea of what does it mean to have public dollars, in the private sphere? What kinds of do we see this in any other? What are other examples of where we've seen this play out well, or not, in terms of whose values get to be represented, and if you're taking public dollars and supporting private enterprises potentially, where are there problems with that? And I think there are, and I think again, like I can get stuck in sort of the intellectual argument of it because I know that that's not necessarily something that's going to apply to me, that I would necessarily opt into. But I think, Jay, to your point, it's, for folks who haven't had a lot of options because they can't move to a neighborhood with a better school, they can't access the same maybe resources outside of the school that folks who have means can, I can see that being a pretty a pretty substantial argument for, yeah, if someone's going to offer me this better opportunity, I'm going to take it. And I think thinking back, just to go back to the podcast, of the idea of, people who attend, who, if you're talking about Black folks or people of color versus white folks, the white folks want the integration or the diversity for the benefit that it brings. Whereas on the other side, it's like, well, no, we just want access to the same resources. Like, they don't necessarily care about hanging out.
We just want running water.
Right. We want the white access to the white people money, and to the other things that they're bringing is not necessarily the people. So I guess all that to say is, I don't know what happens if you present someone with the option of, here's $10,000. Do you want to go and use this to go to a private school, or to get you to a better public school where you have more access to white people and other white things, and that maybe, what's sort of built in, and I don't know, I can't answer that question because I'm not, it's not something that is in my consideration. And I don't know, like, I think there are a lot of different ways to look at it. And I think you're right, Jade, that it does become a wedge because it's, it's easy to sort of identify where the problems are. And it's much harder to empathize with the folks who might actually see benefit in it for them and for their children. Not necessarily the folks who are just saying, hey, great, this is free money that I'm going to now, pocket because it means my tuition at my $40,000 a year school is $10K less.
Here's something I want to interject about this, though, because this is like what rubs me seriously the wrong way, like in watching this. It feels a lot like if you had a discussion where only guys were talking about reproductive rights, right? And they had all these arguments about why it is good or it isn't good, right? It tears apart families. It's not good for the body. There's medical research that says this. And then they would pull out a whole bunch of worst case scenarios. Like, there was this one story of this person who did this, and there was this one clinic who did that, and, blah, blah, blah. And at some point, women would be watching a conversation like that saying, I actually don't give a shit what any of your arguments mean if you're talking about my body, right? Like me. And this is what it feels like in education when I watch white people argue about whether or not vouchers or choice or charter schools or whatever are any better than the main system, and blah blah. It feels like what you're missing a lot of times in that discussion is it's a power discussion. You're talking about you have the power to decide for other people, so you have to be convinced. Like, someone has to convince you that I should be free to choose something that you don't like, right? And that's a lot of power to have over another people, like another group of people. The power to be able to say, well, you have to convince me that you should have the right to decide for yourself, something like that. That's so jacked up. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's the story of the white people in America. I mean, that's why it took 100 years from the end of the Civil War until anything like civil rights was even pretended at, because you had to convince white people to enough white people to come over to the side of right. So I mean, yeah, like, it is jacked up. I don't know who Kayla is, but I just wanted to say a couple of comments that she said, because she's like dropping all this wisdom. She said, like, describing it like following that money following the child is a little incorrect, because the money already does follow the child, which is why schools such as schools I've worked in go to such shenanigans to get our numbers up by October 5th, because that's the day the federal dollars drop. And we don't care. You could never have been to school, but we are not going to withdraw you till October 6th. And then on October 6th, we'll withdraw to spend a whole bunch of people. And that's because if that child withdraws and goes to a different public school in the same district as us, they get more money than us, right? And so, yes, money already follows the child. But Kayla also said, she said that the money wouldn't obviously, and this needs to be clarified, is that the $10,000 or whatever the voucher is, I just picked that number out of nowhere. Somebody made a joke that $10,000 seems like a lot to an Oklahoman or something. But whatever that amount is, it's not going to go to the person. It's not a check. It's not a rebate. It's going to go to the institution. But in a city where I am, and I'm sure, and I know cities around the country like this, I couldn't throw a rock, but I could drive 10 miles in all the directions and pass 150 private schools that are all going to get their $10,000 per pupil checks, and then they're going to lower their tuition, and all the parents get that benefit that way. So the money's going to get to those parents, whether it gets directly sent to them or whether it comes in the form of a lessened tuition bill. And that's why Republicans want this so badly, because it's like a tax break. Now, let's tackle this issue, because it is worth saying, is that this current system is not working. All right. So I am not, because I hear what you're saying, like me sitting around being like, oh, I don't know, vouchers, should we do vouchers? I mean, like it's a super like privileged position. Because like I said, it doesn't even affect me. Like my kids walk across the street to our school, or they used to when they went to school. And it's just our traditional public school, and it's good enough, and everything's good. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't do vouchers, because vouchers might starve the system enough that it implodes upon itself, and then out of those ashes, something can be rebuilt. I am saying I do believe that the further we go, like down the road of charters and some limited vouchers, bigger vouchers, universal vouchers, the more and more starved that public school system gets. And I don't think the free market's going to come in to fix it. I think it will just collapse like a black hole. And maybe that's the best thing in the world. Hear me saying that. Maybe that's the best thing in the world.
This is a hard part about these discussions is they get so system centric, right?
Yeah.
And when Dr. Cole says things like, I don't give a shit, this is the thing. White people love their system so much. It did so well for them. They actually owe all they have to it. I get why it's an affectionate preference for the system. I love my system. I was in it and it did so well, and I did so good there. And it's responsible for who I am. It's a part of me. It's a part of my identity. So my thing is, you get to keep your system. This is like Obama telling people, if you want your doctor, listen, you get to keep your doctor, but we're going to let a whole bunch of other people have something that they want, and you just go ahead and keep your thing. So if you want your suburban schools that look like private schools so you don't have to pay any tuition, but you don't have to have any Negroes in them either, keep them. Keep them. Absolutely. Keep your Negro-free private public schools if you want. Just don't stop other people from having what they want, because right now it's neither a free market nor a government system fully. It is a hybrid already. It's like a mix. Education in the United States is already a mix. People are doing all kinds of things. It's funny to me when we talk about charters, we never talk about magnet schools. We never talk about these islands of privilege called magnet schools that are basically a charter in charter's name without the stigma, because they're unionized. That's the word we haven't said this entire conversation is. We wouldn't be having this conversation if everything in private world was unionized and we didn't have to worry about that. If there was no problem,
52 minutes.
We'd be talking about it.
It took you 52 minutes to bring the unions up. That's a record.
That's a record for me. But like, listen, because we were going to talk about Biden, and the thing that made me think about Biden was the clip that I saw of him sitting with Lily Esclison from the NEA, and she was saying, well, as educators, we have some things that we think are misguided reforms that we do not support, like charter schools. And where do you stand on that? And he gave her exactly the answer she wanted. It was a total like rhetorical question. Well, when I come in, there will be no Betsy DeVos, and we're just going to get rid of those private charter schools, and we're not going to blah, 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 blah. And I sat there thinking to myself, first of all,
what's a private charter school?
First of all, this is too stupid for a man who wants to be leader of the free world to let that come out of his mouth, because it made everybody dumber listening to it. So let's just start there.
Well, so wait,
Second thing, it has nothing to do with Betsy DeVos. And the third thing is that what he is basically doing with her before our eyes is making a pact with her to turn his back on the millions of people that are already in charter schools. The millions of people that are either working there, have a kid there, have started one, or giving their life to it. He has said, I'm not going to be your president.
Yeah.
I'm going to be these guys' president. I'm going to be union president. How is that different than Donald Trump saying, I know who my base is, and I'm going to be a president for my base. I'm not going to be a president of all America. What I want is a leader who says, I am the president of every child in the United States. I don't care if they're in private school, charter school, a unionized school, a non-unionized school. If you are a born citizen of the United States, I am your president, right? We don't have that in either person running right now. Neither one of them.
So I would like to answer the question of like what I think of when I hear that phrase private charter school. And this is what I think, to loop back to that.
Yeah, go ahead. Help, bro. Help.
to loop back to the well-meaning. I think this is what a lot of well-meaning people, and so education has a problem, and has a lot of problems. But one of the big problems is that everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they're an expert in schools, right? And it's not like I have a friend that's a doctor. I don't ever like talk to him about how to be a doctor or like health or anything. I don't know anything about it, right? I mean, like I have a friend that builds things. I have a friend that drives things. I have a friend. I mean, but everyone's always trying to tell us teachers how to teach, trying to tell principals how they should do this, because we all have opinions from when everybody went to school, right? And that's a huge problem. And I think a lot of the people that have their opinions and want to like help with schools, and they want school to be like it was when they were a kid and blah, 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 blah. I think this is the kind of school that they're imagining when they think about these charter schools. I think there are people that are just against Black and brown children. Don't get me wrong. But I think there are some well-meaning people out there. And I'm sorry. I think there's some well-meaning people out there. And this is a private charter school. We have one in Atlanta. So, and I've read research on this around the country. And the way they define them is specifically there's lots of ways to define them, but one of them is racially. And the way they define it is when the district itself is better than 80% Black or Black and brown or whatever, and the charter school that gets set up ends up better than 80% white, right? And so the district is overwhelmingly Black and brown, and yet the school is overwhelmingly white. So we have one of these in Atlanta, and I know exactly why it's overwhelmingly white. And we have several in Atlanta, but one of them is egregious. It is a classical charter school. And if you know about classical curriculum, it's very, very white. And it is located in the middle of our, like the richest part of the city, which is overwhelmingly white. It's adjacent to several very rich private schools. And it is the district of Atlanta is like 85% Black, and the charter school that I'm talking about, the classical school, is like 85% white. And it's entirely housed by people who would be sending their kids to private schools, but instead they started this little boutique charter in the middle of where they all live and play, the middle of the richest part of the whole state, the middle of the richest part of the whole South. They started this boutique charter school so far away from where Black and brown children live. And they all send their kids there, and a couple of Black and brown children bus in from other sides of the city and get to go there, right? That, I don't love that, Chris. Now, I do want to, before I bounce back and you say, I'm just going to say, it may be that in any system, we have to put up with some abuses, and that to me is an abuse. That we have to put up with some abuses so that all the good stuff can happen, right? Because I know the good charter schools. There's good charter schools all over Atlanta that are doing great things for the children that are in their neighborhoods that need.
Let me tell you a secret, Jay. I just want to give you a secret.
All right,
this isn't going to be a secret because people who know me know this already, but I'm going to pretend like it's a secret. If white people want to go to school together and they don't want to be around me, it does me a good service for them to find a place where they can be by themselves, because I am a parent and I don't want my kids going to school with their kids. I actually don't think we're all supposed to go to school together. And if you want that classical school, what it does for me is it helps me understand where you are. Because it's worse when you mix together and you're still that person.
Yeah.
And I got to deal with you.
So I hear you. Yeah. And I think I've talked to you enough to know that somewhere in you is like, you know what? Like, I don't want to be near those people anyway. They're probably racist.
I do not want my kids with them. No.
And I hear Cole in my head just going, I don't give like do what's best for your kid. I'm gonna do what's best for my kid. And like,
that's right.
But this is the deal. I wish I looked this up ahead of time. I don't know how many students go to that school, but they are taking resources from the budget of Atlanta public schools, and they're educating their kids for free when their option overwhelmingly would be private school. These are all people that can afford private schools.
But that's money that wouldn't go to the public schools if they were in private schools. I mean, I'm not sure that's the point.
Okay. Yeah, that's an important point. That's an important point.
Like if they were doing it, hey, we have this great affluent public school here, but we're going to take our resources and go to this charter school, which we have in Los Angeles. That I think maybe is what you're getting at. So the money would disappear if they went to their private schools.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
Some
So
of
at
the
least
money,
this way, at least this way, it stays in a public system of sorts. But this is the thing.
No,
People
no.
watching this,
Hold on.
yeah.
Y'all gaslit me. Some of the federal
I
dollars.
didn't gaslight you.
You did. Because you said something smart, and I was like, yeah, they're right. No. Some of the federal dollars, yes, are tracked with those students, but like that's not the entire budget of a school system. Like the property tax money is still like in Atlanta public schools. There's a finite amount of property tax money, and when some of that money is going to this boutique private charter school, it's lost.
First of all, let's stop for a second. Number one, it's not a boutique private school. It's a school that in Minnesota we would call it a magnet school because we have many just like that. What you just described is exactly a school that we will have in the Twin Cities or somewhere else here. In the middle of a school district that's full of kids of color, we'll have one that has 4% kids of color, right? Yeah. And it's not a charter school; it's a district school, right? So that to me is like we don't call those boutique district schools. We just call them schools. We just call them schools, and we call them white power because when you buy a house and you pay $1 million for a mortgage, yes, you do buy yourself the ability to strong arm people to draw boundaries certain ways or to do bus routes certain ways or whatnot. And it's just so funny how it happens. Wow, that's weird that happened like that, you know. But still, getting back to the point was that for me feels like one of those worst case stories that people tell to gaslight an entire other issue. Like, yeah,
and I'm not trying to do that.
You know, like, so with Biden, we were talking about Biden, right? So he wants to, I think, thread the needle by saying private charter school because it's a weaselly thing to say. He doesn't want to go all the way out and say, I'm just going to be against charter schools because he knows people like me are not going to vote for his ass. And I'm so close to right now to already declaring that I will never vote for a man who says, I want to be more I want to bring more people together than Donald Trump because he's divisive, except for I don't want to represent parents that are in a school that unions don't like. But Chris, the moment you tell me you're a president of only some Americans, that is the moment I say to you, I get what all your supporters and your cult members are going to say to me. Oh, but he's so good on everything else in the world, except for he doesn't think that all people are people in this one way, which is something we can say about Trump and we can say about many other folks, but it's getting more kind of blatant. Even the people who think they're like bringing people together are saying things like, when I come into office, I'm for sure going to make sure this group of people has no representative. Well, I can't do it.
I mean, this is a whole ball of wax at 9:02 p.m., but like clearly Biden has a long history of taking the black vote for granted, right? So
absolutely.
Like, this is
absolutely. This wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody expects this to be the issue. When we first came on, Kim and I were talking about how education falls down a few rungs when people think about the issues that they care about most.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that has to do with that people, once they get their own kid into safe harbor, then they're good on that issue. Right.
What's so fascinating about it is it is the issue that the family cares about most. I mean, it drives any family that has a child, it drives their decisions from age 0 to 18 and then beyond. But yet, as a policy, we just constantly let it slide. It's just fascinating. Sorry to interrupt.
No, and I would say too, I think part of what, look, I think we all know politicians, they say and do what they have to say and do to get the money, because we know that that's what fuels this whole operation. And so I think there's probably, not to dismiss it as insignificant, but I think if he wasn't to say that, I mean, what would the teachers union do? They're not going to turn around and say, well, guys, I don't know, I guess we have to support Donald Trump. Like, I mean, that's just not who their voting who their constituency is and who they would support anyway. So I think in some ways,
a third of them did vote for Trump. Let's just be real. A third of the teachers last time around voted for him. A third, 30%. That's a big number. But keep going.
Okay, fair enough. But I think it's the dance that we know that they do, right? And we see it happen. I mean, and some of it we don't see happen. Some of it's happening in back rooms that we're never going to be privy to knowing how those happen. So I think and again, I don't say that to downplay the significance or what the message sends to folks like you, Chris. And I probably in any, in my own circles, in white circles, I would say something like, well, he is better on all these other issues. And I'm not switching my party allegiance over this one thing. And maybe we can work on this and understand that a lot of policy is going to happen at the local level, at the state level. We have an impact there. I think what it also does in terms of just getting into this, where we start threading around teachers' unions and sort of getting into the discussion piece that to me doesn't really matter. It means we're taking our eye off the ball on things that do matter and things that we can sort of all come together to support, whether it's, supporting, resources for children with disabilities who are in charters and traditional schools. And that is a non, or we're talking about, access to healthcare and how that impacts people with all kinds of needs who are in our school system. And that is something where we could, I think, probably better coalesce around understanding that is a bigger priority, or it should be, than, worrying about whether, this is good or this is bad when it comes to, teacher union representation and what that means and who's pulling the political strings. And, again, to take it back to what we were saying in the beginning around whose voice is getting amplified. This is the voice, this is the conversation that's getting amplified. It's around these potential policies around vouchers or union politics. And we're not in turn amplifying voices of people who have needs in education that are completely outside of any of these topics that we've been talking about. And I wanted to say that as something that I've been learning a lot, I've been trying to learn a lot more about, and understanding, what are the voices and the conversations that are not being had, because we're so hung up on charters and vouchers and non-charters and unions. And, like we say, it's never about the kids.
No,
right? Or
can't even talk about
teaching.
Yeah.
Or how do we elevate the profession to where it should be, frankly?
No.
And what would it take as a country to make this, a more desired, path and make sure that people going into the profession are prepared and well-trained and serving children well. But we can't have those conversations,
and you know what?
Because
he should be talking about that, though. Here's the thing. Biden should be saying, we're going to make sure that every kid in America gets a great teacher. We're going to make sure that every classroom, that best practices are taking place in every classroom and that outcomes are going to matter. This is what I want to hear from a president right now. I don't want to hear all this, well, the union told me to say. Well, what I'm supposed to say here, because I'm slimy and because I'm transactional and I'll say whatever you want me to say, it's like the human league thing, like, who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? That whole thing, right? Like, no, come on, dude. Speak as a statesman, speak as a person who knows how to do the right thing. The right thing is to make sure that every kid in America gets a great teacher, that goes to a school that is well-resourced, that has the options and the pathways that aren't determined by how much money they have in the bank, how rich their parents are, what color their parents are, but it's just determined by how many pathways we open up for them to get what they want. This is what a president should be saying. So he's already de-energized the vote, in my opinion, by selling out to this. It's needless for him to have to do this stuff that he's saying right now. He could be so much more inspirational. It's needless just to go after private charter schools. Now, a lot of people watching this, not going to agree with me. I noticed that someone in here put that Dr. Fuller had talked about this thing with Biden, and Dr. Fuller said, like, listen, it's not Biden that I love, it's Trump that I loathe. So like, in the beginning, I would have been with you, but now I will say I agree with that, except for I don't know that people know the extent to which I think education is the issue, the single issue of the nation, and how debasing it is, I think, for people to think it's one of many. It is not one of many. The intellectual development of the children of the United States, someone has to stand on that as extreme as I'm going to be about it, to say, no, that's not one issue of many. And I can guarantee you this, there's someone listening, probably a white person, someone listening to this right now, who, if Biden was bad on another issue that was just one issue among many, that he would de-energize their support. If he was bad on reproductive rights, if he was bad on gay marriage, if he was bad on Israel, if he was bad on any of these things, that for those lobbies and constituencies would be enough for them to think twice, regardless of how good he is on everything else, right? If he was a complete homophobe, right, but he was so good on criminal justice and health insurance and all these other things that we really want, it wouldn't be so easy to just kind of say, well, it's just one thing.
Swallow, yeah.
I know we got to wrap here, but agree or disagree on that one. Tell me what you guys think. In the end, what do you think?
Look, I mean, I will say, he wasn't my first choice. He wasn't my fourth choice. There are a lot of other issues where I've felt very uncomfortable, particularly around his history with women, and not necessarily all women's issues, but some of the things that have really been were just are extremely problematic in my mind. I also happen to, I don't know what the one issue would be that would break it for me, to be honest. I mean, I've been a Democrat my whole life. I'm a progressive. I'm involved in a lot of progressive causes, and I do a lot of work for the Democratic Party and for Democratic candidates. So I don't know. I would have to think about that, Chris. And I think that's a great question for any of us to ask: is what is that one issue? As a Jewish person, I can tell you that yes, there are folks in the Jewish community who absolutely will say, "Well, we think I like him on all these other things, but bad for Israel, so Trump's my guy." I mean, again, that's not where I stand, but I don't know. So I think that is a good question for most of us. People who do identify as liberal Democrats, of what would be the deal breaker. However, what I will say is, I think if we're in agreement that Trump is not the right choice, that Trump that it's as Dr. Fuller's, it's not that I love Biden, but I loathe Trump. If we're all in agreement that this is absolutely a disaster, whether it's education, whether it's COVID, whether it's healthcare, whether it's climate change, I don't care why you vote for Biden. I don't care if you I don't care if you go in and you're happy about it. If you go in wearing your Biden t-shirt, which I ordered myself a shirt. Like, I don't care if you do that, or if you say, oh, I will do it, but I won't be happy about it. Like, I don't care. We're talking about our, these people are not our lovers. They're our, yeah, there you go. they're politicians. And I think we have to be careful, because even the ones that we do maybe respect and admire the most are going to let us down too. And that's happened to other folks that I've followed. And I will just say, just as my last little point on it, when I was talking about choices, and, you look at someone like Cory Booker, who really was one of the only people who was, bold enough to actually say, to talk about education reform. And it's like, oh, so the black guy is the one we're not listening to. That's the voice who, sort of gets shut out of the process earlier than others. But that's where I'll leave that. I adore Cory Booker, and there were other folks that I liked a lot as well. And really did have to kind of do some mental gymnastics around how I felt about, Elizabeth Warren and, sort of where she stood on education. And that was really difficult for me. So that's my piece on that. Jay, what about you?
I like that answer. Jay, what about you?
I'll just say, Chris, of the three of us, your vote is possibly the only one that will matter, because Kim lives in California and I live in Georgia, and they can talk about. They talk about it all the time. I'll believe it when I see it. So Chris, you're in a swing state, my friend. So just think really carefully.
We're not supposed to be a swing state. Actually, Minnesota is the only consistent, Minnesota's the only state in the union that didn't go for Reagan out of all the states. Right. So
because of Mondale, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, because of that, just because
hometown pride.
People think we're purple. We have not. It's been a very liberal state for a long time, actually. Reliably old school liberal. Yeah. It's not feeling that way right now, but it's in play now. Yeah. And here's why. Okay, so Jay, I'm glad you brought that up. It's in play. Yeah. And a lot of things are in play. So maybe I've just been dense for a long time. I saw this chart just a couple of days ago that was from the 2016, like who voted for who. And I knew that Hillary got more popular vote. So there was this side that was Hillary and this side that was Donald Trump. And they were only split by a small number of votes, but she won the popular vote. She had more votes. But who really won was none of the above, right? I never saw the part of the pie that was none of the above. 100 million people. Eligible voters didn't vote at all. Didn't vote at all. So who really won presidency last time around was I don't give a shit won last time. And if I were one of the candidates this time around, realizing how razor thin things can be and knowing that I don't give a shit wins elections, I would kind of not want to do needless things to shave off even a percentage of people, even a small sliver of people. I would not want to mess around with 70,000 votes. Is that what it came down to last time in some of the swing states?
Across 3 states,
70K.
I mean, and in some counties, you were talking about dozens of if you even zoom in by county. Yeah.
Wasn't there
it's
one
really
county
astonishing.
where it was one vote? There's one where it was one, like a single vote somewhere.
Yeah, I think in Wisconsin.
Biden doesn't want to play with me or people like me.
I will say, I mean, look, I think I think as it shows too, and I think which is very important as someone who, in my sort of blue bubble here in California, where I've been doing a lot of activism. Actually, I've been doing some texting and phone banking for Minnesotans and for Georgians in the last couple months. So I'm sort of playing around in your states, but I think one of the messages that we also try to really convey, it's the up and down the ballot, right? It's president is one piece of this. You have of course, your Senate, your local representatives, you have your school boards. And the farther down the ballot you get, I think actually is the closer you're going to get to being involved in policy. And I think sort of surrounded by that, looking at organizations, which I would say to anyone who's listening and watching, what organizations in your cities locally that are working on the most local issues to where you are addressing these issues. For me, I've been very involved with an organization called Speak Up, which is parents really all across across Los Angeles, charter and traditional. It's really an everybody group who just really want kids' voices to be kids and parents' voices to be more present and have a seat at the table. And so we're doing a lot of really impactful work on that level, which I know will continue regardless of who wins in November. And I certainly have my choice of who I want to win for a variety of reasons. And in that instance, we still have a lot of work to do on the ground. So.
All right. Well, take us home, Jay. What say you? Kim is very optimistic and I think doing what a good
I have to be, because otherwise I would just be under the covers and eating ice cream and it wouldn't be good.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. The only thing I thought could beat Trump was a kind of a global recession, and we're sort of in it. So if we come out of it, I think he wins. And even a little bit. If we even start to see daylight, I think he wins, because America. So is that what you want to hear? You want me to call the election? Is that what we're doing?
No, wrap it up. Wrap it up where we are, because right now I feel like in some ways the thing that started that conversation was me seeing the clip of Biden sitting with Lily, knowing who they represent, and they are making a deal before my eyes that affects people that are not in their community.
So let's come back.
They're at the highest level of power. They are making a pact before my eyes that says, we're going to screw this group of people over here. They're education minorities. Nobody cares about them anyways. They don't have a home right now. So
public school Black and brown children are not in their orbit at all.
If they're in unionized schools, they count.
Yeah. No,
they count.
I just mean they're not in, but that's not who they're that's not the constituency when they're having that conversation. No, I know it. They should be. I was just gonna say, at risk of just to loop all the way back, I'm really close in my life to thinking we might need to push more towards universal vouchers so that we can starve the system and let it burn and start over. So I just wanted to make that really clear in my little pushback with the private charters, boutique charters. Maybe that's, I don't even know that I care. I might be with Cole. I don't care, and we'll see. We got to get out the other side because it's not working right now, and that's fact. So
you're good with that. You're not with the nice white parents who want to put your kid in a public-private school and then have politics against other people having what they want. You do have some valid questions and critiques about what the next thing would be, which I think is smart. That's good. At least you're not just, saying, let's just all drink the Kool-Aid and jump off the bridge. I hope you heard what I said tonight. I do separate the academic discussion around free markets and all that stuff, utopian libertarianism from what practical programs and proposals are on the table right now. And the ones that I see are actually really just about giving kids who don't have opportunities that they could use. That to me, I'm for. I'm 100% for that right now. So,
yeah.
And actually, too, I'm saying something that neither of you guys are saying. See, I'm more on the white side. I'm more of a friend to white people than you guys are in this one way. Because I'm saying if white people want to go to school together, right, I'm saying I support you. I support you to go to school together.
But I don't want to go to school with only white
No, I'm
people.
just saying though, if
That
they
was-
do though, like for the ones that do, I'm their
I know,
friend.
yeah,
I'm your
yeah.
friend. If you guys want to go to
Okay.
school together, I'm for you. And if you,
You
have a
heard,
kid,
you heard it here first, friend of
you heard it here.
you know,
And if you're a private school white parent and people are telling you that you don't deserve to have choice because you're a private school and you're white and blah, 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 I'm still your friend because I don't believe that to be true. I don't think those kids are any less kids either. I don't think like just because you're this kind of kid, you'll be fine. Like I hate when people say that. Oh, you know, they'll be fine anywhere. No, that's still a kid, right? Like I don't know if you've checked recently, those kids still have problems. Those kids still have issues, blah, blah, blah. And so I don't want a president or anybody in leadership who treats any group of kids like they're not unique and like they don't have needs, because they all do. And I want a president who stands up for that, who says, I'm for every kid in America. Look, Christine Laster put, friend to white people with fists.
you're ally to the white folks.
I'm an ally. Oh my
ally.
God, I get to be an ally. Oh yeah.
I'm so thrilled to have been here for this moment. This is really.
I'm an ally. I never thought of it that way. I'm totally an ally. I thought that was just for white people. So now I get to be an ally. I feel empowered now. I feel like really empowered. All right, guys. Well, listen, I appreciate this. This has been a lot of fun for me.
This was
over
wonderful.
by 20 minutes, so I'm sorry that I took eating into your guys' time tonight. I know you guys got things to do.
And I had, I think, about 3 different location changes. So I apologies to anybody who had to watch the walking laptop across the house.
It worked for me to have to do like a Gen X name that tune.
We should next time. Well, she's got a whole repertoire of songs that are not of her own generation. So maybe a little bit of an old soul in my 12-year-old. So
well, yesterday we bought a trumpet. So if we do this again, next time we do this, you might hear a trumpet in the background.
Great.
Going off.
I love it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and for everybody who's been watching, great comments and great folks watching this time. And this was like a much more watched one than the last time, so it's getting better and better and better. I appreciate this. Appreciate our time. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate you, Ju, and Kim for coming in. Your first time jumping into the flyer. You just jumped right in. So, all right, everybody.